Hello, my name's Charles from Charles N Photography. Today I'd just like to talk about miniature tripods. How useful are they? Why would you use them? Now, I do a lot of landscape photography, astrophotography, where a miniature tripod probably wouldn't come as handy as that, but also some wildlife photography, and sometimes you just cannot get low enough. And when you're trying to get like a horizontal viewpoint of a bird in the water or on land, you just like to get that straight line of sight between you and the bird or the lizard or whatever. And what this does is actually minimize your depth of field, so everything in the background is very blurred, and it makes the bird or whatever you're shooting stand out a lot. So I didn't have one at home. What I do have at home is my nice Ultra Vanguard tripod. It's nearly 40 centimeters long. So standing it out like this still means that I'd have to tilt the lens towards the ground, and it wasn't really what I was after. Plus, there's quite a bit of weight in this. So when I'm walking around doing wildlife, I could be walking around for a couple of hours, and I didn't want something this heavy, but I still wanted a fairly strong tripod. So I looked on eBay for a miniature tripod, something very short. I didn't want anything taller than around 30 centimeters, but I also wanted it sturdy enough that could take the weight of this beast. So this is my Nikon D7500 coupled to the Nikon 200 to 500mm f5.6. Now my camera's around 750 grams. The lens is just over 2.1 kilos, so it's nearly 3 kilos. And when you're shooting wildlife or you're using a lens this big, all the way out to 500, you really need something very stable, or you're just going to get vibration and you're not going to get a very sharp shot. So I started looking on eBay, and everything that I could find was around $60 odd. The cheaper stuff, I just wasn't interested in. It looked flimsy, but even like around $60 odd, these little tripods had multiple legs, and that is something that I didn't want. The reason being is I want to be as light as possible and as sturdy as possible. Once you get a couple of legs in there, you're increasing the weight, and also because they've got multiple legs, the metal sometimes is thinner and it's just not as sturdy, and all these legs have got to collapse to each other, so it just didn't suit my need. So I started thinking, like, I really want this, how am I going to go about? And then I realized that I had an old Weifeng tripod in my cupboard. I hardly ever used it anymore because a few years ago I bent one of the legs, and also I'd lost one of the little grommets down the bottom, and I'd modified it a bit, but it wasn't the most stable tripod when you extended it. So most of the time it just sat in my car when I went to did astro workshops and all that, in case somebody needed a tripod, or I would use it just to hold some of the lights when we would light up cars, houses and all that, when we were doing nighttime photography. But basically it's just been sitting here in my cupboard for the last 2 years. So I started looking at it and I thought, well, I have everything that I want at home. Once I cut this little tripod down, take all the legs out, I'm going to have a very nice little tripod. 2, I can actually modify this thing to exactly the height that I want. It's going to be very stable. It's going to have a full-size tripod head on there, so when I want to do landscape photography and get that low down view, and while I'm talking I'll actually pop up a couple of pictures of what I'm talking about, because a couple of weeks ago I just went out here to Lake Eden and I really want a low down view. It was sunset, well, twilight by the time I took this picture, and there was a lot of lily pads in front of me, so I want to get down as low as possible. So I used this little tripod, and I was only about 40 centimeters above the water, so it gave me a very low down view of the water, Plus I still got some nice views of the clouds and all that in the sky using my Takeena 11 to 20mm lens on the Nikon D7500. But getting back to this little tripod, so I'm a bit of a handyman, and like most things in photography, I tell people photography is a great hobby, but it doesn't have to cost the earth. Sometimes with a bit of lateral thinking, you can actually make something yourself or come up with something that you can use that it wasn't even designed for. This is like, I end up cutting these legs, you can see them here. This tripod extends to about 1.5, and this is the little bung leg that I'm talking about. You can actually see here, I end up having to put some tape, electrical tape on there with a bung on the end, just to give it that cushioning so I could actually use this tripod. But if I hold it like this, it flexes, and it was a very good little tripod because I brought this one over from when I lived in Thailand many years ago, and it did its job back then. But once I got a heavier camera, I ended up getting better tripods, and it's just sitting there, you know. So I end up cutting the legs. Now this is what the tripod looks like now. So these little legs are only 25 centimeters long from end to end, and with a bit of lateral thinking, I went down to Kmart, because once the legs were cut, basically I ended up with a very sharp end. I went and bought 2 sets of these BMX handlebar holders, and would you believe it, they were perfect fit. I just had to put them in a bit of boiling water for a couple of minutes just to make them more flexible, push them on there. So it actually looks like a little, quite cute little tripod. It was quite funny because when I used it at Lake Eden a few weeks ago, it was the first time I actually took it out. Before I walked down to the water's edge, I was just on a rock wall and I was just having a bit of fun. And this one guy walked up and he goes, "Wow, that is such a cool little tripod. Where did you buy it?" I said, "It's a DIY invention from my place." So this thing weighs in at around 500 grams, something like that. But the beauty of it is that with this bald head that's on top here, it'll hold at least 10 kilos. So now I'm actually quite low to the ground, around 30 centimeters, and strong enough to put, I'll wind this out, to put this beast on there. You know, I have no concern at all that it'll tip over. It is a very stable tripod. Like this, it is so good. But the beauty with this thing also, this one also, is that because the center shaft, this tripod could extend, I actually cut the center shaft off level with the base here. So now if I want to get just about ground zero, I'll put these in and lock them in. There. You can probably just see there. Can you see how low this is? One hand span, around 10 to 12 centimeters from the ground. The D7500, like a lot of newer cameras, has a tilt screen at the back. So if I turned on, click on the LCD screen, I'm actually looking through the screen. I don't have to lie down on the ground. It's also a touch screen, so I could actually be looking down saying, yep, okay, there's the bird, or there's the lizard that I want. Touch the screen. There's no vibration in the lens. If I was scared of a bit of vibration, I can put like a 2-second internal timer on there. So 1, 2, and pop goes the photo. But touch screen, the camera focuses on the animal or the item that I want to photograph, takes the photo. I don't have to lie down on the ground, which is a beauty, because like at the moment, like a lot of Eastern Australia and southern Queensland, we've had torrential rain. And the last thing you want to do is lay down on the ground in the wet and all that. Not only do you get wet, but you get bitten by ants and all that. So it's a very good way and a very cheap way. So if you've got an old tripod or Gumtree, you might be able to pick yourself up a very good tripod. Might have been a bit worn for 15, 20 bucks. Cut it down, cut the center shaft off, and you've got yourself a very sturdy mini tripod. Now, I also do videos with my camera, and I found a bald head when you're doing video isn't all that good, because when you want to move around, pan, it's not that stable. It has a tendency of leaning from left to right. So another beauty that I've got is, I'll lock this up. When I bought my Vanguard tripod, the company that I bought it from were quite generous in giving me one of these, I'll screw it on, pan and tilt heads. Now when it got here, I told them, I said, well, I really didn't want a pan and tilt because you guys know that I just use bald heads, and I bought a bald head with it. And the manager said, he said, listen, he said, you know, we've just got so many of these in stock that you've bought quite a bit of gear off us, so we've just thrown it in. You can give it away to a client or just keep it for yourself and use it whenever. It's been sitting in my cupboard for over a year and a half now because I'm not really keen on these. But now that I'm doing a lot more wildlife and especially doing video work, I find that the pan and tilt is great because this tripod, I can actually just lock it in, and this Vanguard pan and tilt head is pretty good. The nut on the side actually locks two ways. So at the moment, it's actually locked in so that I can go up and down, but once I've locked it, I can actually spin it around from side to side. If I unlock it and move it, lock the other way, now when I lock the handle, that's it, there's no movement. So when I'm doing video work, it's quite good because I can actually just pan across, and when I'm doing video, there's no up and down shaking. So for $10 for the bike grips, I've ended up having a very good tripod. So just to show you some of the gear that I use, and sometimes photography doesn't have to cost too much. Now I've talked quite a bit also about my wildlife setup. I am going to make a video and just talk about why I like shooting with my D7500 and this amazing Nikon 200 to 500mm lens, which I believe if you're shooting Nikon and you're into wildlife, this is a must-have lens. For around $1,800–$1,900, unless it's on sale, it is, you know, like an awesome lens. So hopefully within the next week or so, I'll do a video on my wildlife gear, and I'll also talk about, in this video, I'll talk about how I set up the camera, the shutter speeds that I use, the f-stop that I use, everything in detail, just to help people when they're starting out in wildlife, because I feel that sometimes, like, any little bit of advice that you can get will certainly help you on your way. And I've been doing photography now, not just wildlife, but doing photography for so long that I've got quite a bit of experience, and due to other factors that have come into my life in the last year or so, I'm not going to be doing too many more workshops. My health isn't crash hot, so I've got a young daughter that I'm looking after a lot more as my wife is working. So I feel that doing videos just to help people, I can actually put all the knowledge that I have that I've gained over the years to a practical point and share this knowledge with people that follow me on Facebook, and now I'm actually starting a YouTube channel. They'll actually follow me on YouTube. So if you got any questions, send me a message. I'll be more than happy to help you. So that's it for now. Watch some of my other videos if you want. So until next time, bye for now.